The snow fell like judgment from a colorless sky. She lay where they had left her, 3 days deep into the northern wilderness, her body a map of violence written in bruises and broken bones. The executioner's whip had done its work with mechanical precision, each stroke measured and delivered without malice, which somehow made it worse. At least hatred would have been personal. This was simply procedure, the elimination of a defect. Sarah counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. Each inhale brought a knife of cold into her lungs. Each exhale carried a wisp of warmth that the winter devoured greedily. Her silver dress, once the ceremonial garb of an Omega awaiting judgment, hung in frozen tatters around her frame. Blood had crystallized on the fabric, turning it into something that caught the fading light like dark rubies scattered across silk. On her shoulder, the rejection mark burned with a cold fire that had nothing to do with the temperature. A crescent moon seared into her flesh by the pack's brand master, the symbol of the pathless, the mark of those deemed unworthy of the pack's protection, unworthy of shelter, unworthy of life itself. She had not screamed when they branded her. That small victory was all she had left. The Silver Fang Pack had been her home for 28 years. She had grown up running through its forests, learning its songs, memorizing its laws. She had believed, with the unquestioning faith of youth, that the pack protected its own, that loyalty was rewarded with belonging, that she would find her place among them, even if she was quieter than the others, even if her wolf seemed to sleep deeper than most. Her mother had died when Sarah was 7, taken by the winter fever that swept through the lower quarters every few years. Her father had followed 3 years later, lost to a hunting accident that the elders called unfortunate but unavoidable. She had been raised by the pack after that, passed from household to household, never quite belonging to any of them. A ward of the collective, fed and sheltered but never truly loved. She had learned early to watch, to listen, to notice the things that others missed, the way certain elders exchanged glances when they thought no one was looking, the whispers that stopped when she entered a room, the careful distance that even the kindest pack members maintained, as if they sensed something about her that she herself could not see. Then came the awakening ceremony. Every Omega, upon reaching maturity, was required to sing the bonding song before the assembled pack. It was a rite of passage, a demonstration of worth, a proof that one carried the sacred gift of connection that made Omegas valuable to the hierarchy. The song was simple. Every Omega before her had sung it without difficulty. It was as natural as breathing, they said, as instinctive as the shift between human and wolf. Sarah remembered standing in the ceremonial circle, the torchlight painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. She remembered the faces of the Elder Council, arranged in their ancient seats, their expressions neutral, but their eyes sharp with expectation. She remembered the weight of the pack's attention, hundreds of wolves watching her from the galleries above, waiting to witness her transformation from orphan ward to proper pack member. She had opened her mouth and nothing came. Not silence exactly. Something had risen in her throat, something that felt vast and wild and utterly wrong for the gentle melody she was supposed to produce. It was like trying to pour an ocean through a drinking straw. The pressure built and built, and she had swallowed it down desperately, terrified of what might emerge if she let it free. She tried again, the same pressure, the same wrongness, the same desperate swallowing. A third time. And this time, for just a moment, something almost escaped. A sound that was not the bonding song, not anything she recognized, something ancient and wild that made the torches flicker and the shadows dance in patterns that should have been impossible. She had clamped down on it with everything she had, and the sound died in her throat. The Elder Council had watched with faces carved from stone. 3 attempts, the law stated, 3 chances to prove worth. 3 times Sarah had failed. The whispers had started before she even left the ceremonial circle. Defective, broken, a drain on pack resources, an embarrassment to her bloodline. Within a week, the council had rendered their verdict. Within a month, she stood before the executioner. No trial, no appeal, just the cold reading of her crimes against the natural order, and the sentence that followed, exile unto death. The executioner had been an older wolf named Garrett, a man she had seen around the pack grounds her entire life. He had always nodded to her when they passed, a small courtesy that most others did not extend. When he raised the whip, she had seen something in his eyes that looked almost like apology. Then the lashes began, and she stopped seeing anything at all. Now she lay in the snow, counting breaths that came slower with each passing minute, and she found herself thinking not of the life she was losing, but of the question that had haunted her since that failed ceremony. What had tried to come out when she opened her mouth? The cold was a living thing now, crawling beneath her skin, settling into her bones with the patience of an old enemy. Her fingers had stopped hurting hours ago. Her feet were distant memories, belonging to some other body in some other life. The stars above her blurred and sharpened with each sluggish heartbeat, and she thought they looked like eyes, thousands of silver eyes watching her die with cosmic indifference. She had always loved the stars. As a child, alone in whatever temporary bed the pack had assigned her, she would stare out the window and imagine that the stars were watching over her, that somewhere in that vast, cold darkness, something cared whether she lived or died. Foolish thoughts, the thoughts of a lonely child who had never learned to stop hoping. Perhaps this was mercy, she told herself. Perhaps this was kinder than the alternative. A slow fade into nothing, surrounded by the beauty of the winter mountains, rather than a life spent as the pack's unwanted burden. She closed her eyes and waited for the darkness to complete its work. That was when she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, wrong. Not the soft padding of wolves, not the crunch of deer or elk moving through the snow. Something larger, something that moved like it owned the mountain and everything on it. The rhythm was strange, almost limping, as if the creature making those sounds had been broken at some point and rebuilt itself from the pieces. A shadow fell across her face, blocking even the pale light of the winter stars. Sarah forced her eyes open. Through the haze of cold and blood loss, she saw him. A man, but not entirely. His form seemed to flicker at the edges, as if he existed in two states simultaneously, caught between human and beast in a way that defied the natural order of things. The moon emerged from behind a cloud, and its light revealed the full horror of what stood before her. His left side was a landscape of devastation. Burns, old and deep, pulled his face into a permanent expression of barely contained fury. The scars twisted down his neck and disappeared beneath his dark clothing. A map of suffering that spoke of fire and agony and a survival that perhaps should not have been possible. She could see where the skin had healed wrong, where muscle and bone had been reshaped by flame into something that was neither whole nor broken, but suspended somewhere between. His right side was almost handsome. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, the architecture of nobility that marked the old bloodlines. The contrast between the two halves was jarring, as if two different men had been fused together by some cruel artist. His eyes found hers. Amber, shot through with veins of black like cracks in ancient glass, eyes that held something feral, something barely chained, something that looked at her not with pity or disgust, but with a calculation that made her skin prickle despite the numbness. She had seen wolves before, had lived among them her entire life, but she had never seen eyes like these. They belonged to something that had stared into the abyss and emerged forever changed by what it had seen there. He knelt beside her, moving with a predator's grace despite his obvious damage. She caught his scent: burned leather, pine smoke, the metallic tang of old blood that had soaked into skin and never quite washed away. And beneath it all, something that made her dying wolf stir in recognition. Alpha, not just any alpha. King. The words surfaced in her mind with the weight of absolute certainty. She did not know how she knew. The knowledge simply arrived, as natural and undeniable as the cold. This was not a common alpha, not a pack leader or a territory holder. This was something older, something that resonated with the deepest parts of her wolf nature. He reached out and touched the rejection mark on her shoulder. She flinched, expecting pain, but his burned fingers traced the crescent moon with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. His touch was almost reverent, and she felt something shift deep in her chest. A crack in the ice that had been forming around her heart. A whisper of possibility in a world that had offered her nothing but endings. His voice, when he finally spoke, was gravel and distant thunder. "You are dying." She wanted to laugh. It came out as a wheeze that tasted of copper. "I know." "You do not beg, you do not plead." It was not a question, but she answered anyway, her voice a rasp barely louder than the wind. Would it change anything? No. Then why waste the breath? Something shifted in his ruined face. Not quite a smile, but perhaps the memory of what smiling had once felt like. A ghost of expression haunting the scarred landscape. Why indeed? He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze. She would not look away. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear, even if fear was the only warm thing left inside her. Whatever he was, whatever he wanted, she would face it with the same stubborn dignity that had carried her through the whipping and the branding and the 3 days of slow death. She had nothing left to lose. That, she was discovering, was a kind of freedom. "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately. His fingers had not left her shoulder, still tracing the brand as if reading a message written in scar tissue. His touch was surprisingly warm against her frozen skin, and she wondered distantly if he even noticed the cold. "A ghost," he said finally, "a dead man who forgot to stop breathing." Before she could respond, before she could ask the 1,000 questions that crowded her failing mind, he lifted her into his arms. The world tilted violently, and she felt the last of her strength leave her body. Pain flared and then faded to a dull roar, her wounds protesting the movement, but too exhausted to truly fight. His arms were strong around her, impossibly strong, as if the damaged exterior hid something far more formidable beneath. He held her against his chest, and she could feel the heat of him through his clothes, a furnace burning inside a ruin. As consciousness began to slip away, she heard the sound of his heartbeat against her ear. Wild, irregular, broken. It matched the rhythm of her own. The last thing she felt was the warmth of his coat, and the terrifying sensation that her exile had just begun something far worse than death. She woke to firelight and the smell of herbs. The cave was vast, carved by ancient water from the heart of the mountain. Torches lined the walls at regular intervals, their flames casting dancing shadows across stone veined with silver and quartz. The ceiling soared into darkness, too high to see, and somewhere in the depths, water echoed in a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. The sound was oddly comforting, a pulse that suggested the mountain itself was alive and breathing. Sarah tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her ribs, her back, her shoulder, but it was pain with a different quality than before, sharper, more present, more real, the pain of healing rather than dying. She was lying on furs, expensive ones, the kind made from winter wolves and meant for royalty. She had seen such furs only once before, in the chamber of the Silver Fang Alpha during a rare visit to the inner sanctum. These were even finer, the pelts of ancient wolves whose bloodlines had died out generations ago. Her wounds had been cleaned and wrapped with linen that smelled of salves, bitter and medicinal and strangely soothing. Someone had changed her out of the ruined silver dress and into a simple wool tunic that hung loose on her frame. The fabric carried a scent she recognized: burned leather, pine smoke, the ghost of that distinctive heartbeat. She turned her head, ignoring the protest of her neck muscles, and found him watching her from across the fire. In the light, she could see him more clearly than before. He was tall, impossibly broad, built like a warrior in his prime despite the obvious damage to his body. His hair was the color of tarnished silver, falling to his shoulders in a way that suggested he had stopped caring about appearances long ago. The burns covered fully half his face and extended down his neck, disappearing beneath a black tunic that had seen better years but was clean and well-maintained. His hands, resting on his knees, bore the same damage as his face: skin that had melted and reformed, fingers that had clearly been broken and set without proper care. Yet those hands had tended her wounds with precision, had dressed her injuries and wrapped her ribs and applied the salves that even now were working their slow magic. But his eyes were what held her, amber with that strange black fracturing, and beneath the predator's calculation, a depth of sorrow so profound that her wolf wanted to rise up and comfort him, to press against him and offer the simple solace of presence. She crushed that instinct immediately. Whatever he was not safe. Nothing about him was safe. The care he had shown did not change the fundamental danger that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Where am I?" Her voice was broken glass, shattered and rough. "Safe!" He moved to the fire, adjusting the logs with a poker that looked hand-forged. The metal bent into a shape that suggested it had been made by someone who knew their craft. His movements were economical, precise, the habits of a man who had lived alone long enough to waste nothing. "My refuge," he continued without looking at her, "where no pack reaches and no laws apply." Sarah pushed herself up onto her elbows, ignoring the protest of her ribs. The cave around her told a story, if she looked carefully enough. Maps pinned to one wall, covered in marks and notations she could not read from this distance. Weapons hung from pegs driven into the stone. Swords, axes, a bow that looked like it had seen 100 battles and survived them all. Books stacked in corners, their spines cracked from use, some of them bound in leather so old it was nearly black. This was not the den of a madman hiding from the world. This was the headquarters of someone planning something. Someone who had retreated to lick his wounds but never stopped thinking, never stopped preparing. "You are Cale Ironwood," she said. He went still. His back was to her, but she could see the tension that suddenly gripped his shoulders. The poker hung motionless in his hand. The Wolf King, the one who burned the castle 5 years ago, the one they said died in the flames. He turned to face her, and the firelight caught his scars again, made them look like the topography of some foreign and terrible country. Mountains of scar tissue, valleys where the flesh had melted away, rivers of damage that told a story of agony she could barely imagine. "They said many things," he replied. His voice was carefully neutral, but something flickered in those amber eyes. "Most of them were true, but you did not die." A statement, not a question. She was too tired for questions, and besides, his living presence was evidence enough. "No." He set down the poker and moved closer, though he kept the fire between them like a barrier. "No, I did not die, though not for lack of trying." She watched him. This king turned hermit, this ghost of a man who smelled of fire and regret. Her wolf was restless beneath her skin, wanting something she did not understand, and she forced it down with the same discipline that had gotten her through the executioner's whip. "Why did you save me?" He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled, water dripped somewhere in the darkness, marking time in a rhythm that had probably gone on for centuries. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than before, rougher, as if the words cost him something to produce. "Because I recognized the mark on your shoulder, the crescent moon. The brand," she said, "the symbol of the pathless." "No." He moved then, crossing around the fire to kneel before her. Up close, she could see the damage more clearly, could see where the flames had eaten into muscle, where bone had been visible in the early days of healing. He had survived something that should have killed him, and the survival was written across his body like a testament to sheer, stubborn will. "That mark is not what they told you it was," he said. "It is not the symbol of defects and failures. It is the mark of the Pathfinders, the rarest gift in our bloodline." He reached into his tunic and withdrew a small book, leather-bound and ancient, the pages yellowed with age. The binding crackled as he opened it to a section near the middle, and he held it so she could see the illustration rendered in faded inks. A crescent moon, identical to the brand on her shoulder, but rendered in silver ink, surrounded by text in the old tongue that had not been commonly spoken for generations. The image showed figures marked with the symbol, standing beside thrones and altars, their heads bowed in concentration, as if listening to something only they could hear. "Pathfinders," he said. They could see truth when others saw only what they wanted to see. They could navigate paths that no map could chart, find ways through the impossible, pierce the veils of deception that others wrapped around themselves. They were revered once, consulted by kings and councils. Their word could end wars or start them. Sarah stared at the page, at the elegant renderings of figures marked with the crescent moon. In the illustrations, they were honored, respected, sought after for their wisdom. "That cannot be," she whispered. "I am defective. I cannot sing the bonding song. Every Omega can sing it. It is the most basic proof of worth." His eyes met hers, and something in them shifted. A question, or perhaps an answer he had already reached. "Cannot or will not?" "I tried. At the ceremony. 3 times I tried. I wanted to sing it. I needed to sing it. Everything in my life depended on singing that one simple song." "You tried to sing their song," he said. "The question is whether you can sing yours." The words hung in the air between them, strange and loaded with meaning she did not quite grasp. He closed the book and set it aside, then settled back on his heels, watching her with that unnerving intensity that seemed to see far more than she was comfortable revealing. "Sing," he said. She shook her head, feeling the old fear rise. The memory of the ceremony, the pressure in her throat, the desperate swallowing. "I cannot." "Try." There was no command in his voice, no alpha compulsion, no threat or promise, only an invitation, offered without expectation. She could refuse, and she sensed he would accept her refusal without argument. But something in her stirred. The memory of that night, of the thing that had tried to emerge. For 28 years she had fought against that pressure, convinced it was evidence of her failure, her wrongness, her fundamental defect. But what if she had been wrong? She took a breath, steadied herself, felt her wolf rise to the surface for the first time in days, weak but present, curious about what was happening. And instead of reaching for the bonding song, the gentle melody that every Omega learned from childhood, she simply let go. What emerged was not a song. It was a sound like wind through mountain canyons, like the howl of wolves beneath a hunter's moon, like the earth itself drawing breath after an age of silence. It rose from somewhere deeper than her chest, deeper than her wolf, from some ancient place she had never known existed. The sound was wild and vast and utterly unlike anything she had ever produced, and it terrified her even as it poured from her throat. The cave responded. Light bent. Shadows danced in new patterns, moving in ways that had nothing to do with the flickering flames. The air itself seemed to shimmer with silver, and she felt the world around her become suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Every detail snapped into focus. Every hidden thing revealed itself. She saw Kael as he truly was. Not just the scars and the sorrow, but the chains that wrapped around his spirit, invisible and crushing. She saw the beast inside him, trapped and raging, throwing itself against barriers that were slowly crumbling under the weight of years. She saw 5 years of isolation, of guilt, of a man slowly dying from the inside while waiting for the outside to catch up. And she saw something else, a flash quick as lightning, a face she did not recognize. A man in council robes, older, distinguished, with gray at his temples and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. He was speaking to someone hidden in shadow, his voice clear despite the impossible distance. The girl must not survive. If she lives long enough for the gift to mature, she will see everything. She will expose us all. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Sarah stopped singing, if it could be called singing, and found herself trembling. The cave had fallen silent except for the crackle of flames and the distant drip of water. Her throat felt raw, but not damaged. Used, rather. Exercised in a way it had never been before. Kael had not moved, but his expression had transformed. The hardness in his face had cracked open, and beneath it she saw something that looked dangerously like hope, like a man who had been drowning and just felt his hand break the surface. "Your pack was right to fear you," he said softly, "and wrong to exile you." Her mind was racing, trying to process what she had seen. The vision of the man in robes, the words that had cut through her like a blade. Someone in the council had known about her, had wanted her dead not because she was defective, but because of what she might become. "Someone wanted me dead," she said, "not because I was defective, because of what I might become." Yes, the word was simple, but it carried the weight of everything he had been carrying for 5 years. "Who? I do not know for certain, but I know someone who might." He rose to his feet and offered her his hand. She looked at it for a moment, this burned and broken thing that had nonetheless saved her life and tended her wounds with care. Then she took it. His grip was warm despite the scars, and he pulled her up with a strength that seemed at odds with his damaged appearance. She stood on unsteady legs, clutching his arm for balance, and found herself closer to him than she had been to anyone in years. "Rest now," he said. "Heal. When you are strong enough, I will tell you a story about a castle that burned, and the truth that died with it." He turned to leave, to fade back into the shadows of the cave, but her voice stopped him. "Why do you care?" she asked. "What does any of this matter to a dead man?" He paused at the edge of the firelight. When he looked back at her, his amber eyes were unreadable, but something in his stance had changed. He stood straighter, as if a burden had shifted slightly. "Because 5 years ago, I lost everything trying to expose a conspiracy that had infected the heart of my kingdom. And I failed. The man who destroyed my family, who murdered my parents, who twisted the council to his will, still lives, still rules from the shadows." His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "And because your gift, Pathfinder, is the only thing I have seen in 5 years that might be able to prove what I could not, that might be able to show the world the truth." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone with the fire and the weight of everything she had just learned. Sarah did not sleep that night. She lay on the furs, staring at the dancing shadows on the cave ceiling, and replayed the vision in her mind. The face of the man in robes, the certainty in his voice when he spoke of her death, the cold calculation of a man ordering murder as casually as he might order dinner. Someone in the Silver Fang Council had wanted her eliminated, not because she was broken, but because she was dangerous, because she could see truth, because her mere existence threatened something that someone was desperate to protect. Her entire life had been a lie. The rejection, the exile, the brand on her shoulder that had been meant to mark her as worthless. All of it orchestrated by someone who knew exactly what she was and feared what she might become. She touched the crescent moon on her shoulder. It no longer burned with cold fire. Now it felt almost warm, as if awakening to its true purpose, as if recognizing finally what it had always meant. Not a mark of shame, a mark of power. When dawn broke, gray and cold through some crack in the mountain she could not see, Kyle returned. He brought food, dried meat, and winter berries that he had stored somewhere deeper in the cave system. They ate in silence, and she used the time to study him. He moved like a predator, all coiled power and restrained violence. But there were moments when she caught something else. A tremor in his hands that he tried to hide. A distant look in his eyes that suggested he was fighting a war inside his own skull. The chains she had seen during her song were real in their own way, she realized. He had bound himself somehow, locked the beast within under locks of will and pain. The question was why? "Tell me," she said when the meal was finished. "Tell me about the castle." He was quiet for a long time, staring into the remnants of the fire. The embers glowed red and orange, pulsing like a dying heart. When he spoke, his voice was flat, carefully controlled, as if the only way to tell this story was to strip all emotion from it. "My father was King Aldrich Ironwood. He ruled the Northern Territories for 30 years, and he was a good king. Just, firm when needed, merciful when possible. He believed in the old ways, in the balance between Alpha and Omega, in the duties that came with power." Cale's jaw tightened, the muscles bunching beneath the scarred skin. He trusted his advisors, especially Lord Aldrich Voss. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had heard it before, spoken in hushed tones at council meetings she was not supposed to overhear. Voss, the Gray Shadow, some called him. The man who had shaped policy for 2 generations, who sat at the right hand of power and whispered in the ears of kings. "Voss was patient," Cale continued. "He served my grandfather before my father, built his influence slowly, carefully, like a spider spinning a web so fine you never saw it until you were trapped. By the time my father took the throne, Voss controlled half the council through favors and debts and carefully placed secrets. My father never saw the web being woven around him." He paused, and Sarah saw his hands clench into fists. The knuckles went white beneath the scars. "My mother was a pathfinder." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. "She kept it secret," Cale said. The gift had become dangerous by then, associated with witchcraft and manipulation by those who feared its power. But she used it quietly, to help my father see through the lies of those who sought to deceive him. For years, she was his invisible shield. What happened to her? She discovered what Voss truly was. Kael rose and moved to the wall where the maps hung. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch one of the parchments. Voss was not content to advise. He wanted to rule, but he lacked royal blood, lacked the legitimacy to claim the throne outright. So he built a different kind of power. Economic, military, political. He positioned himself to be indispensable, and he began eliminating anyone who might threaten his control. He turned to face her, and in the firelight his scars looked like wounds freshly made. My mother saw through him, saw the truth of what he was planning. She tried to warn my father, but Voss was faster. He had her poisoned the night she went into labor with me. Sarah felt her breath catch. The cruelty of it, the calculated timing, was almost too much to comprehend. "Everyone believed she died in childbirth," Kael said. "Natural causes. A tragedy, but not suspicious. Even my father believed it. He mourned her for years, never knowing that the man who stood by his side, offering comfort and counsel, was the one who had taken her from him." The fire crackled. Shadows danced on the cave walls like ghosts of the dead. "I grew up with Voss as my tutor," Kael continued. "He was kind to me, patient. He taught me statecraft and history and the art of war. He praised my accomplishments and guided me through my failures. I admired him. His voice had gone bitter, laced with a self-loathing that was painful to hear. 25 years. I admired him for 25 years, never seeing what my mother had seen, never knowing what he was, and then my father fell ill. Poison, Sarah said. It was not a question. The pattern was too clear. Slow acting. Untraceable. It took 3 months for the sickness to kill him, and in those 3 months, Voss consolidated his power, replaced loyal guardsmen with his own men, elevated his allies to key positions, prepared for the transition that would finally give him everything he had worked for. But you discovered the truth. Kael's laugh was harsh and hollow, a sound devoid of any actual humor, only at the end, when it was far too late. A servant girl came to me in the night. She had seen Voss speaking with the court physician, had heard enough to understand. She risked everything to warn me. He fell silent for a moment, and Sarah wondered what had happened to that brave servant girl. She did not ask. Some questions had answers too dark to speak aloud. I confronted Voss in the throne room, demanded answers. He denied everything, of course, called me grief-maddened, suggested I needed rest and perhaps confinement for my own protection. The council, his council, agreed. They tried to have me confined to my chambers. The chains, Sarah thought. The ones she had seen wrapped around his spirit. I lost control, Kael said quietly. The beast took over. I had never felt rage like that, never felt my wolf rise with such absolute fury. 5 years of hidden manipulation, my mother's murder, my father's slow assassination, all of it crashing down on me at once. His hands were shaking now, the tremor visible even from across the fire. I killed 12 men that night. Some of them were Voss's creatures, assassins and conspirators who deserved what they received. But some of them were just guards, just men doing their duty, following orders they believed were legitimate. His voice cracked just slightly. I still see their faces, every night, every time I close my eyes. She did not offer comfort. Comfort was not what he needed, and she sensed he would reject it anyway. Instead, she listened and let him continue. I burned the west wing of the castle trying to destroy the evidence of Voss's crimes. Documents, records, anything that might prove what he had done. But the fire spread faster than I expected, and by the time I came back to myself, the entire west wing was an inferno. And Voss escaped. Of course he escaped. He always has a way out, always has a contingency. And when the smoke cleared, I was the monster, the mad prince who murdered innocent guards and set fire to his own home. Voss was the hero who tried to stop me, who bears his own scars from that night as proof of his loyalty. Kael turned to face her fully, and she saw the weight of 5 years pressing down on him like a physical burden. I bound myself after that. An old magic, blood magic, something I found in the forbidden texts of the temple archives. I locked the beast away because I could not trust myself, because I had become exactly what Voss wanted me to become, a weapon that destroyed itself. Why hide, she asked. Why not fight? Fight with what? Every noble house believes Voss's version of events. The people think their prince died a madman. I have no army, no allies, no proof of anything. Just the word of a scarred fugitive against the most trusted advisor in the kingdom. He moved closer, and his amber eyes burned with a desperate intensity that seemed to illuminate the darkness around them. Until now. Your gift, Pathfinder. You can see truth. You can show others what really happened. You might be the only thing in this world that can expose Voss for what he is. Sarah understood then. She understood why he had saved her, why he had nursed her back to health, why he had told her things he had clearly never told another soul. She was not a damsel he had rescued out of kindness. She was a weapon he had found half buried in the snow. And honestly, she was not sure she minded. I saw something, she said slowly, when I sang. A man in council robes speaking of me, saying I had to die before my gift matured. Kael's expression sharpened, the warrior in him surfacing through the grief. What did he look like? She described him as best she could. The shape of his face, the color of his eyes, the distinctive way he held himself with an aristocrat's perfect posture, the gray at his temples, the coldness in his gaze. With each detail, she watched Kael's expression grow darker, harder, more certain. Voss, he said finally. That was Voss. The realization settled over her like armor being buckled into place. The man who had destroyed Kael's family was the same man who had ordered her death. They were enemies of the same monster. "He knows about pathfinders," Kale said. "He has spent 50 years hunting them down, eliminating anyone who might see through his deceptions. You are the first one born in a generation, and he tried to have you killed before you could become a threat. But he failed. He failed. And now you are here, and you are alive, and you can do something that no one else can." She met his gaze steadily. For the first time since her exile, she felt something other than despair. Something that might have been purpose. "I can see truth," she said. "But seeing is not proving. How do we make others see what I see?" Before Kale could answer, they both heard it. The sound of wolves. Distant, but drawing closer. A hunting howl, coordinated and purposeful. The call of a pack on the move. Not random wolves searching for prey, but organized hunters following a scent. Kale's entire body went rigid. His eyes flashed pure black for just a moment, and she felt the shift begin in him, the beast pressing against the chains he had forged with blood and will. "They found us," she whispered. "They found me," he corrected. "I have evaded them before, but never for long. Voss sends hunting parties every few months, testing my defenses, probing for weaknesses. He knows I am alive. He needs me alive, though I have never understood why." "How many?" He tilted his head, listening to sounds she could barely hear. His wolf was closer to the surface than she had yet seen, lending him senses that went beyond the merely human. 20 at least, led by someone with military training. The formations are too precise for common hunters. The howls grew closer. She could feel them now, a pressure against her recovering senses, the weight of hostile intent bearing down on them like a storm front. "There is a passage," Kale said, moving to the back of the cave. "Through the mountain. It leads to an old temple, a place even Voss does not know. You can hide there while I deal with this." "No." The word came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had been dead before he found her in the snow. A place that was now, impossibly, beginning to live again. "No," she said again. "We run together or we stand together. You do not get to be noble now, Alpha King. That time is over." He stared at her for a long moment. The wolf looked out through his amber eyes, assessing her, measuring her worth. And then something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. An acknowledgement that she was not the broken thing they had tried to make her, but something far more dangerous. Something that had survived. "Together then," he said, and took her hand. The wolf song rose outside the cave, closer now, hungry. And Sarah understood in that moment that her exile had led her here not to die, but to stand beside a king who had lost everything and fight for a chance to take it back. The real journey was only beginning. They ran through the mountain's heart like ghosts fleeing judgment. Kale led her through the passages that no map had ever charted, tunnels carved by ancient water and forgotten by time. The stone walls pressed close on either side, slick with moisture that gleamed in the faint phosphorescent glow of minerals embedded in the rock. Their footsteps echoed in strange harmonics, multiplied and distorted until it sounded like an army was moving through the darkness instead of just two wounded souls. Behind them, the howls of the hunting party grew louder, then softer, then louder again as the sound bounced through the mountain's labyrinthine interior. Sarah could not tell if the hunters were gaining or falling behind. She suspected Kale knew from the way his pace shifted between urgent and merely hurried, but he said nothing. His burned hand gripped hers with an iron certainty that brooked no argument. She was still weak. 3 days of dying in the snow, followed by a healing that was far from complete, had left her body a fragile instrument that protested every step. Her ribs ached with each breath. Her legs trembled with exhaustion that went bone deep. But she did not slow down, did not ask for rest, did not give voice to the pain that threatened to overwhelm her. She had spent her entire life being seen as weak, as broken, as a burden to be tolerated and eventually discarded. She would not prove them right now. The passage narrowed, then widened, then split into 3 branches that looked identical in the darkness. Kale did not hesitate. He pulled her to the left, ducking under a low overhang of stone that scraped against her back as she followed. The tunnel beyond sloped upward at a steep angle, and she had to use her free hand to brace herself against the walls as they climbed. "How much farther?" she asked, the first words either of them had spoken since leaving the cave. "Close," he said. "The temple lies at the mountain's heart. We are almost there." His voice was strained in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. She could feel it through the connection that had begun to form between them, tenuous but real. Something was wrong with him, something beyond the obvious scars and the years of isolation. The chains she had seen during her song were tightening. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern, and Sarah stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. The temple of the first moon rose before them like a dream carved from living stone. Columns spiraled upward toward a ceiling lost in shadow, their surfaces etched with symbols that pulsed with a faint silver light. The architecture was ancient beyond reckoning, predating the pack system, predating perhaps the memory of wolves themselves. Arches soared overhead in impossible geometries, and everywhere she looked, the same crescent moon symbol repeated itself, her symbol, the mark of the Pathfinder. The air inside was thick with the scent of incense, sage, and moonflower, and something older, something that smelled like starlight distilled into smoke. At the center of the temple, a great circular pool reflected the silver light like a mirror turned toward the heavens. The water was perfectly still, undisturbed by any ripple, and in its surface she could see the reflection of moons that were not there, moons from other nights, other ages, other worlds. "Sacred ground," Kale said, his voice hushed with something that might have been reverence. "The first temple built by our people, before the kingdoms, before the packs. This is where the old magic was born." A figure emerged from the shadows near the pool, and Sarah tensed, her wolf rising to the surface despite her exhaustion. But Kael's grip on her hand relaxed, and she forced herself to do the same. The woman who approached them was ancient. Her hair was white as fresh snow, her face a landscape of wrinkles that spoke of decades beyond counting. She walked with the aid of a staff carved from pale wood, but her movements were steady, unhurried, possessing a dignity that age had not diminished. Her eyes, when they met Sarah's, were silver, pure silver, with no white or pupil visible, just endless pools of moonlight that seemed to see far more than any mortal gaze should. "Kale Ironwood," the old woman said, and her voice was like wind through autumn leaves. "You have finally found your way back." "Elder Miriam." Kale inclined his head in a gesture of respect that seemed instinctive, ingrained from childhood. "I did not know you still tended this place." "Where else would I be? The temple has been my home for 70 years. I was here when your mother came seeking answers. I was here when the old king consulted the sacred texts. I will be here until the mountain itself crumbles to dust." Her silver eyes shifted to Sarah, and the intensity of that gaze made her feel exposed, laid bare, all her secrets and fears and hidden wounds visible to this woman who had watched centuries pass. "And you have brought a pathfinder," Elder Miriam continued, "the firstborn in a generation. I had wondered if the bloodline had finally failed." She approached Sarah with slow, deliberate steps, her staff tapping against the stone floor in a rhythm that seemed to echo the distant drip of water. When she stood before her, she reached out with a wrinkled hand and touched the crescent moon brand on Sarah's shoulder. "The mark awakens," she said softly, "but incompletely. There is power here, vast power, but it is tangled, confused. You have been fighting against yourself your entire life, child." "They told me I was broken," Sarah said, "that I could not sing the bonding song." Elder Miriam made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so dry and humorless. "The bonding song is a leash, a pretty melody designed to keep Omegas docile and useful. Your gift is something far older, far wilder. It cannot be contained in such a small vessel." She turned to Kale, and her expression grew grave. "You are dying," she said bluntly. "The binding you placed upon yourself is breaking down. I can see it in the way you move, the way you breathe. The beast fights harder with each passing hour. How long has it been pressing against the chains?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Months, perhaps longer. The binding was never meant to last this long. I thought I would be dead before it failed." "You thought wrong," Elder Miriam said, "and now you face a choice. Let the binding break on its own, and the beast will emerge uncontrolled. It will consume everything you are, everything you might still become. You will be nothing but rage and hunger, a monster in truth rather than reputation." "Or," Sarah asked, Elder Miriam's silver eyes turned to her, "or the binding is released deliberately, with an anchor in place, a connection strong enough to ground the beast, to remind it of its humanity." She paused. A bondmate. The word hung in the air between the three of them, heavy with implication. Sarah understood then why Kale had tensed when the elder spoke. A bond between Alpha and Omega was not a casual thing. It was permanent, unbreakable, a merging of spirits that lasted until death, and perhaps beyond. It was the deepest form of commitment their kind could make, and he was asking her to make it with a man she had known for less than 2 days. "I am not asking," Cale said, as if reading her thoughts. He pulled his hand from hers and stepped back, putting distance between them. "I would never ask such a thing. The choice must be yours, freely made." His amber eyes met hers, and in them she saw the truth of his words. He would die before he forced this upon her. He would let the beast consume him, let himself become the monster everyone already believed he was, rather than trap her in a bond she did not want. It was, she realized, the most honorable thing anyone had ever done for her. "What happens if the binding breaks?" she asked Elder Miriam. "If he loses control?" "He will kill," the old woman said simply. "Everything in his path. He will not be able to stop himself. The rage of 5 years, the grief, the guilt, all of it will pour out in a flood of violence that nothing can contain. And when it is over, when the beast finally exhausts itself, the man beneath will be gone forever." Sarah looked at Kael. At the weariness that bent his shoulders, the desperate hope he was trying so hard to hide. He had saved her life when he could have walked past. He had shown her the truth of what she was when everyone else had called her defective. He had given her a purpose when she had been ready to surrender to the cold. And now he was prepared to die rather than compromise her freedom. "The hunting party," she said. "They will reach this place eventually." "Yes," Cale said. "Voss will not stop until he finds me, until he has whatever it is he needs from me." "What does he need?" "I do not know. He needs me alive, that much is clear. Every hunting party has orders to capture, not kill. But I have never understood why." Elder Miriam made that dry, humorless sound again. "The heirloom vault," she said. Both of them turned to look at her. "Beneath the castle there is a vault that contains the artifacts of your bloodline, the crown of the first king, the blade of the mountain, items of power that can only be accessed by one who carries the ironwood blood." Kael's expression shifted as understanding dawned. "Voss cannot claim the throne officially," Elder Miriam continued. "He lacks the legitimacy of royal blood, but with the artifacts of power, he could establish a new dynasty, rewrite the laws of succession, transform himself from advisor to emperor. Your blood is the key that opens that door." "He needs me to open the vault," Cale said slowly. "That is why he keeps me alive. That is why he sends hunters instead of assassins." The revelation settled over them like a weight. Voss had spent 50 years building his shadow empire, and now he was so close to his ultimate goal. All he needed was Kael's blood, freely given or forcibly taken, to unlock the ancient power that would cement his rule forever. But there was something else, something that tugged at the edge of Sarah's awareness, a truth waiting to be uncovered. She closed her eyes and reached for the song within her. Not the wild, uncontrolled eruption of before, but something more focused, a question directed at the universe, seeking an answer. Images flooded her mind. She saw Voss as a young man, already cold-eyed and calculating, bowing before the throne of Kael's grandfather. She saw him whispering in the old king's ear, planting seeds of suspicion against rivals who stood in his way. She saw bodies falling, accidents and illnesses and duels that always seemed to favor those Voss wanted elevated. She saw Kael's mother, beautiful and fierce, her silver eyes so like Elder Miriam's. She saw her standing before the council, trying to speak, trying to reveal what she had seen. And she saw Voss's hand signal to the servant who would later slip poison into her evening tea. She saw Kael's father, withering away over months, his mind clouded by slow-acting toxins that mimicked natural illness. She saw Voss standing beside the deathbed, wearing a mask of grief while triumph danced in his eyes. And she saw something else, something that made her blood run cold. A room full of bodies, men and women and children, all bearing the crescent moon mark. Pathfinders, dozens of them, hunted down over 50 years of patient, methodical genocide. Voss standing over them, not with hatred, but with the cold efficiency of a man eliminating a threat to his plans. She was the last Pathfinder, and if Voss found her, the bloodline would end forever. She opened her eyes, gasping, and found both Kael and Elder Miriam watching her with concern. "I saw it," she said, her voice trembling. "All of it. He killed them, not just your parents. All of them. Every Pathfinder born in the last 50 years. Men, women, children. He hunted them down and killed them before they could mature, before their gift could threaten his web of lies." Kael's face had gone pale beneath his scars. "I am the last," Sarah continued. If I die, there will be no more pathfinders. No one left who can see through him. He wins. Forever. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant drip of water seemed to pause, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Then Kale spoke, and his voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands. I will not let that happen. You cannot stop it alone, she said. She met his amber eyes and held them. You are dying. The binding is failing. And when it breaks, you will become exactly what he wants you to be. A monster to be hunted. A cautionary tale to frighten children. She stepped forward, closing the distance he had created between them. But together, she said, we might have a chance. You do not know what you are offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. A bond. Permanent and unbreakable. My life tied to yours for however long either of us survives. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the ridges and valleys of damage beneath her fingertips. I spent my entire life being told I was worthless, defective, a burden. She paused. You are the first person who ever looked at me and saw something else, something powerful, something worth saving. His amber eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she was making this offer out of obligation rather than choice. He found none. If I claim you, he said quietly, if we bond, the pack will hunt us forever. We will never be safe. We will never have peace. We will have this, she said. This moment, this choice, this chance to fight back against everything that tried to destroy us both. The howls of the hunting party echoed through the tunnels beyond the temple, closer now. Time was running out. Kael looked to Elder Miriam. Will you witness? The old woman nodded, her silver eyes solemn. I will do more than witness, she said. I will guide the ritual. It has been many years since I performed a true bonding ceremony, but some things are not forgotten. She moved to the edge of the great pool, her staff tapping against the stone in that strange, rhythmic way. Come, she said, both of you, stand before the waters of the first moon. They approached the pool together, and Sarah felt the power of this place pressing against her skin like a physical force. The water was impossibly still, reflecting moons that existed in memory rather than sky. The silver light from the columns intensified, gathering around them like a living thing. The bonding of old, Elder Miriam intoned, is not the pretty ceremony of modern pacts. It is not ribbons and flowers and soft words. It is blood and will and the merging of two souls into something greater than either alone. She produced a knife from somewhere in her robes, its blade made of the same silver metal that veined the temple walls. Kael, give me your hand. He extended his hand without hesitation. Elder Miriam drew the blade across his palm, and blood welled up, dark red in the silver light. Sarah, give me yours. Sarah offered her hand, and the bite of the blade was sharp but brief. Her blood joined his, dripping into the still waters of the pool. Where it touched the surface, the water began to glow. Speak your vows, Elder Miriam said. Not the words of the modern ceremonies, the words of your hearts. Kael turned to face Sarah, his bleeding hand finding hers, their blood mingling together. I offer you my strength, he said, and his voice resonated through the temple like a bell. Such as it is, I offer you my protection, for whatever time remains to me. I offer you my truth, hidden from all others, but laid bare to you. Sarah felt the power building between them, a connection forming that went deeper than flesh, deeper than bone. I offer you my sight, she said, the gift they tried to destroy. I offer you my voice, the song they feared. I offer you my will, unbroken by exile and death. The blood in the pool began to spiral, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. The silver light intensified until the entire temple blazed like a captured star. Kael pulled her close, and she felt his heartbeat against her chest, wild and irregular and somehow perfect. The binding, Elder Miriam said, her voice barely audible above the rising hum of power. Release it now. Let the beast free. Sarah felt Kael tense against her, felt the terror that gripped him at the thought of what he was about to do. I am here, she whispered. I will hold you. I will not let you fall. He closed his eyes, and deep within him she felt the chains shatter. The transformation was violent. She had seen wolves shift before, the fluid grace of form changing from human to beast. This was nothing like that. This was an explosion of suppressed rage, 5 years of caged fury tearing free in a single agonizing instant. Kael's body twisted, bones breaking and reforming, muscle tearing and rebuilding. His scars stretched and split as something far larger forced its way through his human skin. A howl ripped from his throat, a sound of pain and release and terrible, terrible hunger. The beast that emerged was massive, black-furred and amber-eyed, standing as tall at the shoulder as Sarah's head. Its teeth were like daggers, its claws like curved swords, and in its eyes she saw nothing of the man she had come to know. Only hunger, only rage, only the need to destroy. It turned those eyes on her, and she felt her wolf cower in instinctive terror. This was apex predator. This was death incarnate. Every cell in her body screamed at her to run. She stood her ground. "Kael," she said, and her voice did not waver. "I see you." The beast snarled, taking a step toward her. Its breath was hot against her face, carrying the scent of blood and fire. "I see the boy who grew up in a castle, trusting a man who had murdered his mother. I see the prince who tried to do right and lost everything. I see the king who bound himself in chains rather than risk hurting the innocent." The beast's snarl faltered. "You are not a monster," she continued. "You made a mistake. You lost control in a moment of grief and rage, but one mistake does not define you. One night of violence does not erase 30 years of trying to be good." She reached out and placed her hand on the beast's massive head, feeling the coarse fur beneath her fingers. "Come back to me," she said softly. "I am your anchor now. I am your home." The beast shuddered. A whine escaped its throat, high and keening, the sound of something breaking that was not bone or flesh. And then slowly, impossibly, it began to shrink. The transformation back was gentler than the eruption had been. Kael emerged from the beast like a man surfacing from deep water, gasping and trembling, tears streaming down his face. He collapsed against her and she caught him, holding him upright as the last of the transformation completed. His amber eyes found hers, clear, sane, human. And through the bond that now connected them, she felt his love, vast and terrified, and absolutely certain. The temple doors exploded inward. They came pouring through the breach, 20 wolves in their shifted forms, massive and deadly. At their head ran a man who had not transformed, a warrior in armor that bore the insignia of the royal guard. He was older, gray at the temples, his face weathered by years of command. Behind him, more wolves spread out through the temple, surrounding them with military precision. Kael stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the hunters. But he did not shift, did not snarl, did not give any sign of the beast that had so recently been unleashed. "General Thane," he said, and his voice carried a weariness that seemed to go beyond exhaustion. "It has been a long time." The general stopped a dozen paces away, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "My king," he said, and there was something complicated in his voice, old loyalty warring with newer convictions. "I had hoped the reports were wrong. I had hoped you truly died in the fire. And yet you hunt me. I follow orders, as I have always done, as you trained me to do." "Whose orders?" Kael asked. "Mine, or the man who murdered my parents?" General Thane's expression flickered. "Murdered is a strong word. It is the truth." Elder Miriam stepped forward, her silver eyes blazing. "Lord Voss poisoned the queen 35 years ago. He poisoned the king 5 years past. I have seen it in the waters of the first moon. I have watched the truth unfold." "The old woman speaks," Thane said slowly, "but old women are known to be confused." Sarah moved to stand beside Kael. She did not know if what she was about to do would work. Her gift was new, untested, barely understood, but she had to try. She began to sing. The sound that emerged was not the wild canyon howl of before. It was something more focused, more controlled. A light that she cast outward, a truth that she projected into the air itself. Images formed in the silver light of the temple. Voss kneeling beside the queen's deathbed, satisfaction hidden behind a mask of grief. Voss whispering to the physician who would administer the slow poison to the king. Voss standing in a room of dead pathfinders, methodically checking each body to ensure none had survived. The wolves watching began to shift back to human form, unable to maintain their transformations in the face of what they were seeing. Their expressions ranged from shock to horror to dawning understanding. General Thane watched it all with a face carved from stone. But Sarah could see the truth in his eyes, the certainty crumbling, the loyalty fracturing. 50 years, she said, letting her song fade. 50 years of manipulation and murder. The man you serve killed his king, his queen, and every pathfinder born in a generation. He did it to seize power. He did it to ensure no one could ever see through his lies. And he needs Kael alive to open the heirloom vault, to claim the artifacts that would make him emperor. She stepped toward the general, and he did not draw his sword. "I am the last," she said. "If I die, there will be no one left who can show you the truth. Voss wins, forever." The silence stretched. The general's hand remained on his sword hilt, but he did not draw. His eyes moved from Sarah to Kael to the images still fading in the silver light. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he was trying to suppress. "I trained you," he said to Kael, "from the time you could hold a sword. I watched you grow from a boy into a man. I believed you had gone mad that night. I believed Voss when he said the grief had broken you." He paused, his jaw working. "If what I have seen is true, then I have served evil for 5 years. I have hunted my rightful king. I have been a tool of the man who destroyed everything I swore to protect." "It is true," Kael said. "Every word, every image. Pathfinders cannot lie in their showing. It is the nature of their gift." General Thane looked at the wolves who had come with him. Some met his gaze with confusion, others with the same dawning horror he had shown. A few stood rigid, their expressions carefully blank, and Sarah marked them as likely loyalists to Voss rather than converts to truth. "I cannot give you my army," the general said finally. "Not yet. Too many of my men are Voss's creatures. If I turned on him now, there would be civil war within my own ranks." "Then what can you give us?" Sarah asked. "Time." The general's eyes met hers, and she saw the decision crystallize within them. "I can give you 5 days. I will report that we searched the mountain and found nothing, that the trail went cold in the deep passages. Voss will send another party, but it will take time to organize and dispatch." "Why?" Kael asked. "Because I need to see for myself." The general's voice hardened. "I need to return to the castle and watch Voss with new eyes. I need to know if what you have shown me is real or some elaborate trick. And I need time to identify which of my men can be trusted when the moment comes." He turned to go, then paused at the ruined temple doors. 5 days, my king. If you truly want to reclaim your throne, if you truly want to expose Voss for what he is, then come to the castle in 5 days. Come prepared to prove your accusations before the full council. Come prepared to fight if the proof is not enough. He looked back one last time. "And pray that I find the courage to stand beside you when that moment comes." Then he was gone, and his wolves followed, disappearing into the mountain passages from which they had emerged. Sarah let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Can we trust him?" she asked. Kael was quiet for a long moment. "Thane was my mentor," he said finally. "He taught me everything I know about combat, about strategy, about leadership. He was like a second father to me." "That does not answer my question." Kael turned to face her, and in his amber eyes she saw a complicated mixture of hope and resignation. "I trusted Voss once too," he said. "I have learned that even those we love can deceive us. But you believe Thane will keep his word." "I believe he wants to. Whether he will be able to, whether the doubt will eat at him until he convinces himself the visions were lies, that I cannot say." He reached out and took her hand, their bond pulsing warm between them. "We have 5 days," he said. 5 days to prepare, to gather whatever allies we can find, to plan our approach to the castle. And if Thane betrays us, then we die fighting." He squeezed her hand. "But at least we die together, and at least we die knowing we tried." Elder Miriam approached them, her silver eyes thoughtful. "The bond has taken," she said. "I can see it in you both. You are stronger together than you were apart. The beast is calm now, anchored by something more powerful than chains." She looked at Sarah. "But you are still learning your gift, child. What you did tonight, showing the truth to all those wolves, that was impressive. But it was also exhausting. You are running on empty, and the path ahead will require everything you have." "What would you suggest?" Sarah asked. "Rest tonight, both of you. The temple will shield you from Voss's seekers, at least for now. Sleep, recover your strength. Tomorrow I will teach you what I can of the Pathfinder's art. You have 3 days to learn before you must leave for the castle." She turned and began to walk toward the back of the temple. "There is much you need to learn," she called over her shoulder, "and very little time to learn it." Kael led Sarah to a small chamber off the main temple, furnished with simple bedding and a basin of clear water. The silver light filtered through the stone in soft, muted tones, creating an atmosphere of peace that seemed impossible given what they had just survived. Sarah sat on the bed, and the exhaustion hit her all at once. The song, the visions, the bonding ritual, the confrontation with Thane. It had drained her more completely than the 3 days of dying in the snow. Kael sat beside her, close but not touching. The bond between them hummed quietly, a connection that felt both strange and natural. "I should apologize," he said. "For what?" "For dragging you into this, for making you a target, for everything that is about to come." She looked at him, this king who had lost everything and somehow kept fighting. "You did not drag me anywhere," she said. "Voss made me a target the day I was born. You just gave me the chance to fight back." She lay down on the bed, her body screaming for sleep. 5 days, she murmured. "We have 5 days to prepare for war." Kael lay beside her, maintaining that careful distance, but through the bond she could feel his presence like a warmth against her soul. "Then we had better rest while we can." Sleep took her quickly, pulling her down into darkness. But even in her dreams, she could feel him there, the bond that connected them, the hope that had been born in the ruins of both their lives. 5 days until everything changed. 5 days until the truth was finally told. She slept and did not dream of snow. When Sarah woke, she did not know how much time had passed. The silver light in the chamber had not changed, offering no hint of whether it was day or night in the world above. But her body felt different, stronger, more present. The bone-deep exhaustion had faded to a manageable weariness, and when she moved, her ribs protested, but did not scream. Kael was gone from the bed beside her, but through the bond she could feel him nearby. Training, perhaps, or speaking with Elder Miriam about what was to come. She rose and made her way to the main temple chamber. What she found there stopped her in her tracks. Kael stood in the center of the space, stripped to the waist, his body a map of old wounds she had only partially glimpsed before. But beneath the damage, muscle moved with fluid power as he worked through a series of combat forms, his movements precise and deadly. This was not the hesitant, controlled man she had come to know. This was the warrior he had been before the fire, the beast and the man working in harmony rather than conflict. "The bond has changed him," Elder Miriam said from beside her. Sarah had not noticed the old woman's approach. "He has been fighting himself for 5 years. Now that battle is over, and all that energy can be directed outward. Will it be enough? Against Voss's army? No." Elder Miriam's voice was matter-of-fact. "Against Voss himself? Perhaps. The outcome will depend on many things. Your gift, Kael's strength, the choices of men like Thane who stand at the crossroads." She turned to face Sarah, her silver eyes penetrating. "Which brings us to your training. Come, there is much to learn and little time." The next 3 days passed in a blur of instruction and practice. Elder Miriam was a demanding teacher. She pushed Sarah to the limits of her newly awakened gift, forcing her to sing again and again until she could summon the visions at will rather than waiting for them to overwhelm her. She taught her to focus, to narrow the truth-seeing to specific questions rather than drowning in the flood of everything. She taught her the history of the Pathfinders, how they had once been the conscience of the wolf kingdoms, advisors who could not be deceived and therefore could not be corrupted. How the fear of that power had led to persecution, to hunts like the one Voss had conducted. How the gift had grown rarer with each generation until Sarah was the last of a dying bloodline. And she taught her the price. "Every use of the gift takes something from you," Elder Miriam explained. "Energy, years, the substance of your soul. Use it too much too often, and you will burn out like a candle left too long in the wind." "How do I know when I am using too much?" "You will feel it, a coldness at your core, a dimming of the light within. When that happens, you must stop or risk losing yourself entirely." Sarah practiced until she could feel that coldness brushing against her edges, then pulled back, rested, and began again. Meanwhile, Kael trained his body and studied the maps he had brought from his cave refuge. Plans were made and discarded, strategies considered and reconsidered. The castle was a fortress, well-guarded and familiar territory for Voss. Any direct assault would be suicide, but there were other ways in. "The tunnels," Kael said on the second night, spreading a worn parchment across the temple floor. "Voss knows about the main passages, but there are older ways, routes used by my ancestors before the castle was built, routes that even the current maps do not show." "Can you find them?" "I spent my childhood exploring every inch of that place. There is a passage from the northern cliff face that opens into the wine cellars. From there, we can reach the throne room without being seen. And once we are there, then you show them the truth." His amber eyes met hers across the map. "Just as you showed Thane. Let them see what Voss has done, and the support for his regime will crumble. Show them the heirloom vault. Show them why he needs me alive. Show them the pathfinders he murdered. Let them see the full scope of his treachery. Unless they choose not to believe. Then we fight." He smiled grimly. "But at least we will have tried." On the morning of the fourth day, they prepared to leave. Elder Miriam met them at the temple doors, her silver eyes solemn. "I have taught you what I can," she said to Sarah. "The rest you must learn through doing. Trust your gift, but do not rely on it completely. Trust your bond, but remember that you are still two individuals with your own minds and wills." She turned to Cale. "You were lost for 5 years," she said, "wandering in a darkness of your own making. But you found your way back. You found her. Do not waste this chance." He bowed his head in acknowledgement. "What will you do?" Sarah asked. "If Voss discovers this place?" "He will not. The temple has stood hidden for thousands of years. It will stand for thousands more, long after all of us have returned to dust." She reached out and touched Sarah's face with gentle, papery fingers. "Go now," she said. "Change the world. And if you survive, come back and tell me the story. I do love a good story." They left the temple through the passages Cale had used to enter, emerging into pale winter sunlight that felt strange after so long in the silver glow below. The mountains stretched around them, vast and indifferent, its peaks lost in clouds. Somewhere beyond those peaks, a castle waited, a throne that had been stolen, a tyrant who had ruled from the shadows for 50 years, and a reckoning that had been 5 years in the making. Sarah took Cale's hand, feeling the bond pulse warm between them. "Together?" she asked. Together he agreed. They began the descent toward destiny. The castle rose from the northern plains like a monument to power and pride. Sarah had never seen it before, not with her own eyes, but she recognized it from the visions that had flooded her mind in the temple. The great stone walls, blackened on the western side where the fire had raged 5 years ago, stood as testament to violence that had never truly ended. The towers pierced the gray winter sky like fingers reaching for something they could never grasp. Banners flew from every parapet, bearing the ironwood crest that Voss had claimed as his own, snapping in the cold wind like the tongues of hungry serpents. It was beautiful in the way that weapons were beautiful, elegant and deadly and designed for a single purpose. Through the bond, she felt Kael's emotions churning like a storm beneath ice. This had been his home. These walls had sheltered his childhood, witnessed his training, held the bodies of his murdered parents. Every stone carried memories he had spent 5 years trying to forget. Every tower reminded him of the boy he had been before fire and blood had transformed him into something else entirely. "Are you ready?" she asked silently through the connection they shared. His amber eyes found hers in the gray morning light. "No," he admitted, "but I will never be ready for this, so we go forward anyway. That is what warriors do. That is what kings must do." They had traveled for a day and a night through mountain passes and frozen forests, pushing hard to reach the castle before Thane's deadline expired. The journey had been brutal, testing Sarah's recovering strength, but she had not complained, could not complain. Too much depended on reaching their destination. Too many lives hung in the balance for her to indulge in weakness now. Captain Ronan Blackwood had found them on the descent from the temple, emerging from a snow-covered ridge with a dozen loyal soldiers at his back. His face bore the weathered look of a man who had lived too long under enemy colors, waiting for a chance that might never come. Gray streaked his dark hair, and lines carved by worry and watchfulness marked his features, but his eyes were clear and sharp, the eyes of a man who had never stopped believing. Ronan had been Kael's personal guard captain before the fire. He had been away from the castle that night, leading a patrol along the northern border, and had returned to find his king declared dead and his world turned upside down. For 5 years he had served under Voss's regime while quietly gathering information, building a network of loyal men, waiting for a sign that his true king still lived. The sign had come when General Thane had returned from the mountain with doubt in his eyes and questions on his lips. Thane had been careful in his inquiries, but Ronan had been watching, hoping. And when the general had begun quietly reassigning men loyal to Voss away from key positions, Ronan had known that something had changed. "My king," Ronan had said when he first saw Kael, dropping to one knee in the snow. His voice had cracked with emotion he could not hide. "I never believed you were dead. I never stopped hoping. Through all these years of darkness, I held on to faith that you would return." "Rise, old friend." Kael had gripped the captain's shoulder with genuine warmth. "We have work to do, and I will need men I can trust at my side." Now they crouched in the tree line at the edge of the castle grounds, watching the guards patrol the walls. The morning mist clung to the stones like a shroud, and the torches that burned along the battlements were pale ghosts against the gray sky. Ronan had provided detailed information about shift changes, patrol routes, and the locations of Voss's most loyal men. He had spent 5 years memorizing every detail, preparing for a moment he had sometimes feared would never come. The picture he painted was not encouraging. "Voss has spent 5 years consolidating power," Ronan said quietly. His breath misted in the cold air. "The castle garrison is 300 strong, and at least half are his creatures. Men he has bought or blackmailed or bred for loyalty from childhood. They will fight to the death for him because they know nothing else." "And the other half?" Sarah asked. "Uncertain. Many still remember the old king, still honor the Ironwood name in their hearts, if not in their words. But they have been fed lies for so long that they do not know what to believe anymore. They have seen the scars on Voss's face, evidence that he fought against the mad prince who burned the castle. They have heard stories of Kael's rampage, exaggerated with each retelling until the truth has been buried beneath layers of myth and fear." "Then we give them the truth," Kael said. His amber eyes were fixed on the castle, and through the bond Sarah could feel his determination like a flame burning steady against the cold. "We get inside, we reach the throne room, and Sarah shows them what Voss really is. Let them see the lies stripped away. Let them judge for themselves what they have been serving all these years." The plan was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. They would enter through the old passages that Kael had discovered as a boy, routes that predated the castle itself and had been forgotten by all but the Ironwood bloodline. They would make their way to the throne room, where the council was scheduled to meet at midday. And then Sarah would sing. Everything depended on her gift, on her ability to project the truth so powerfully that even those who wanted to deny it could not look away, on the strength of a power she had only just begun to understand. The signal came an hour before dawn. A torch flickered 3 times on the eastern wall, the sign that Ronan's men had neutralized the guards at the tunnel entrance. They moved quickly through the darkness, a small group of shadows flowing across the frozen ground. The grass crackled beneath their boots, stiff with frost, and their breath left trails of mist behind them like the spirits of those who had fallen in battles long past. The tunnel mouth was hidden behind a fall of rocks that looked natural, but had been carefully arranged centuries ago by hands that had wanted to ensure their descendants would always have a way in or out of their fortress, regardless of who held the gates. Kael found the mechanism without hesitation, pressing stones in a sequence that Sarah could not follow. His fingers moved with the certainty of deep memory, knowledge embedded in bone and muscle that 5 years of exile had not erased. The rocks shifted with a grinding sound that made them all freeze, listening for any sign of alarm. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Sweat prickled along her spine despite the cold. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours as they waited, barely breathing, for shouts or footsteps or the baying of hunting wolves. None came. The passage was revealed, descending into darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the faint pre-dawn light. "Stay close," Kael said. "These tunnels are different from the mountain passages. Older, more treacherous. My grandfather told me that builders died carving them, and their ghosts still wander the deeper sections." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold. But she followed him into the dark without hesitation. She had not come this far to falter at the threshold. The passage was unlike the smooth, water-carved tunnels beneath the mountain. This was the work of human hands, rough-hewn from bedrock with iron tools that had left their marks in the stone. The ceiling hung low, forcing them to duck in places, and the floor was uneven, treacherous with loose stones that threatened to turn an ankle with every step. Cobwebs draped the walls like funeral shrouds, and the air carried the musty scent of centuries of neglect. But Ronan had brought torches, and Kael moved with the confidence of a man returning to a childhood haunt. He led them through branching corridors, past iron gates that hung rusted on their hinges, past chambers that might once have been guard posts or storage rooms, but now held nothing but dust and shadows. They emerged into the wine cellars of the castle as the first gray light of dawn was filtering through the narrow windows above. The smell of oak and fermentation filled the air, and rows of barrels stretched away into the shadows. Some of those barrels, Sarah knew, held vintages older than the kingdom itself. Others were empty, their contents drunk at feasts she had never attended, by nobility she had never met. "So far so good," Ronan murmured. "The cellars are not heavily guarded. The servants do not come down here until afternoon. We have time to rest and prepare." "Then we wait," Cale said. "The council convenes at midday. We need Voss and the elders in one place, with witnesses to see what Sarah reveals. One chance. We will only get one chance at this." They found a hidden alcove behind a wall of ancient vintages and settled in to wait. The hours crawled past like wounded animals, each minute stretching into what felt like an hour of its own. Sarah used the time to center herself, to reach for the calm place within where her gift resided. She could feel it there, coiled and ready, a power that was still strange to her, but growing more familiar with each use. She could also feel the bond with Kael, a constant presence at the edge of her awareness. Through it, she sensed his tension, his determination, and beneath it all, a fear he was trying hard to suppress. He was afraid of failing again, afraid of watching everything fall apart as it had 5 years ago, afraid of losing her, this unexpected gift that had given him a reason to keep fighting. She reached out through the bond, offering what comfort she could without words. His amber eyes found hers in the darkness of the alcove, and something in his expression softened. The hard lines of his face relaxed slightly, and for just a moment he was not the scarred king seeking to reclaim his throne. He was simply a man, grateful to not be alone. "When this is over," he said quietly, "whatever happens, I want you to know that you have already given me more than I ever expected to find again. Hope, purpose, a reason to believe that the darkness might eventually end." "It is not over yet," she replied. "Save the speeches for after we win." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "As you command, my lady." At midday they moved. The castle corridors were busier now, servants hurrying about their duties, guards patrolling their assigned routes with the mechanical precision of long habit. The sounds of the fortress echoed around them, conversations and footsteps, and the distant clang of metal from the training yards. Life continuing as normal, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Ronan's intelligence proved accurate, and they avoided the major thoroughfares, slipping through servant passages and unused wings until they reached the great doors of the throne room. The wood was ancient oak, reinforced with bands of iron that had been forged in the mountain fires generations ago. They had witnessed coronations and executions, celebrations and conspiracies. Soon they would witness the truth. 2 guards stood at attention outside. Ronan's men dealt with them quickly and quietly, their bodies hidden in an alcove before anyone could raise an alarm. The guards would wake with headaches and no memory of what had struck them. It was mercy they might not have shown if the positions were reversed. Cale placed his hand on the door. His fingers spread across the ancient wood, and Sarah could see them trembling slightly despite his efforts to keep them still. "Once we enter, there is no going back," he said. "Voss will know we are here. His forces will mobilize. We will either succeed in the next few minutes, or we will die trying." "We will succeed," Sarah said, with more confidence than she felt. "We have the truth on our side. Sometimes truth is not enough. Sometimes it is all that matters." He pushed open the doors. The throne room was vast and ancient, its vaulted ceiling supported by columns of pale stone that had stood for 1,000 years. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows across tapestries that depicted the history of the Ironwood line. Warriors and kings, battles won and enemies vanquished, a lineage of power and pride stretching back to the founding of the kingdom. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat the throne itself. It was carved from a single piece of black oak, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the torchlight like dark water. For generations, only those of Ironwood blood had sat upon it, only those who had earned the right through birth and merit. Lord Aldrich Voss sat upon it as if it had always been his. He was an older man, distinguished in the way that power makes men distinguished, with gray at his temples and a face that had learned long ago to hide every thought behind a mask of pleasant neutrality. His robes were rich, but not ostentatious, the garb of an advisor rather than a king. Even now, with the throne beneath him and the crown within reach, he maintained the fiction that he was merely a servant of the realm. But his eyes told a different story. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator who had spent 50 years stalking his prey and was now finally ready to claim his prize. Before him stood the Council of Elders, 5 ancient wolves whose authority had been the backbone of Ironwood rule for generations. They turned as the doors opened, their expressions shifting from annoyance to shock as they recognized the scarred figure who strode into their midst. The guards along the walls tensed, hands moving to weapons, but Voss raised a single finger, and they held their positions. His expression did not change. He had known this moment would come eventually. He had prepared for it. "Cale Ironwood," Voss said, and his voice carried not a trace of surprise. "I had wondered when you would finally find the courage to return. 5 years is a long time to hide in the mountains like a wounded animal. I had begun to think you might never emerge from whatever hole you had crawled into." Cale walked forward until he stood in the center of the room, Sarah at his side. Ronan and his men spread out behind them, a small force against the guards, who were even now moving to surround them. The odds were not in their favor. They had known that from the beginning. "Your time is over, Voss." Cale's voice rang through the chamber, echoing off the stone walls. "Your lies, your manipulations, your murders. Today it all ends." "Murders?" Voss raised an eyebrow, the picture of wounded dignity. "I am merely an advisor, my boy. I have never harmed anyone. Every action I have taken has been in service to the realm, to the stability and prosperity of a kingdom that your family nearly destroyed with their recklessness and weakness. You poisoned my mother. You poisoned my father. You have spent 50 years eliminating anyone who might threaten your grip on power, including every pathfinder born in a generation. And you have kept me alive because you need my blood to open the heirloom vault, to claim the artifacts that would make you emperor." A flicker of something crossed Voss's face. Surprise, perhaps, that Cale knew about the vault. But he recovered quickly. The elders exchanged glances. Some looked skeptical, others uncertain. One, a woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward with interest. "These are serious accusations," she said. "Do you have proof?" "I have something better than proof." Cale gestured to Sarah. "I have truth." Sarah stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye in the room upon her. The moment had come. Everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, came down to this. She thought of Elder Miriam's teachings, of the practice she had done in the temple, of the power that lay coiled within her waiting to be unleashed. She thought of the pathfinders who had died before her, silenced before they could reveal what they knew. She would be their voice now. She would show the world what had been hidden for so long. She opened her mouth and began to sing. The sound that emerged was not the wild canyon howl or the focused projection she had used with Thane. It was something new, something she had not known she could produce until the moment it poured from her throat. A song of revelation, of memory, of truth that could not be denied. It rose from the depths of her soul, carrying with it every vision she had seen, every secret she had uncovered, every lie she had stripped away. The throne room blazed with silver light. Images formed in the air above them, vast and vivid and terrible. Voss, as a young man, already cold-eyed and calculating, kneeling before the grandfather of Cale, already plotting, already scheming. Voss whispering poison into the ear of every king he served, turning them against rivals and allies alike. Voss standing over the body of the old queen, satisfaction hidden behind a mask of grief as she took her last breath. Voss measuring out the slow poison that would kill the old king while the son watched helplessly, not knowing that his father's advisor was his father's murderer. And then the other images, the pathfinders, men and women and children, hunted down across the kingdom, eliminated one by one over 50 years of patient genocide. The rooms where they had died, the orders Voss had given, the systematic destruction of an entire bloodline because it posed a threat to his web of deception. And finally, the heirloom vault itself. Voss standing before the sealed doors, his hand pressed against the lock that would not open for him. His frustration as he realized that without Ironwood blood, the artifacts of power would remain forever beyond his reach. His orders to the hunting parties: capture the prince alive, do not kill him. We need what only he can provide. The council watched in horrified silence. The guards stopped to their advance, transfixed by the visions playing out above them. Even Voss's mask cracked just slightly as he saw his life's work exposed for all to witness. When the song faded, the silence that followed was absolute. "Lies," Voss said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Illusions and tricks. The girl is a witch, nothing more. She conjures phantoms to serve her master's ambitions. Pathfinders cannot deceive," the iron-haired elder said. Her voice was cold with a fury that spoke of trust betrayed. "It is the nature of their gift. Every child knows this. What we have seen is truth." She turned to face Voss, and there was judgment in her eyes. "You murdered our king, our queen. You have ruled from the shadows for 50 years, manipulating everything we believed, corrupting everything we held sacred. You hunted pathfinders to extinction, and you kept the prince alive only to use his blood for your own ambitions. How do you answer these charges?" Voss rose from the throne, and his mask fell away entirely. The pleasant advisor disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous, a predator cornered but not yet defeated. "How do I answer?" He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "I answer with reality, you old fool. Yes, I killed them. Yes, I have been the true power behind the throne for generations. And do you know why? Because I was strong enough. Because I was willing to do what needed to be done. Because while your precious ironwoods concerned themselves with honor and tradition, I was building an empire." He gestured to the guards around the room, his eyes blazing with a madness that had been hidden for too long. "Kill them," he commanded. "Kill them all." Some of the guards moved to obey, but others hesitated, looking at the elders, at Kael, at the images still fading in the silver light. They had served Voss out of duty, out of belief in his version of events. That belief had been shattered, and then General Thane stepped through a side door, his sword already drawn, 30 soldiers at his back. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "By authority of the true king, I command you to stand down." The room erupted into violence. Swords clashed. Wolves shifted, some to fight for Voss, others to fight against him. The orderly throne room became a battlefield in the space of a heartbeat. Kael moved like lightning, cutting through Voss's loyalists with a precision that spoke of decades of training. His blades sang through the air, each strike precise, each movement economical. This was the warrior that Thane had trained, the prince who had been destined to rule before fire and madness had intervened. Ronan and his men formed a protective circle around the elders who had declared against Voss. The council members were not warriors, but they were not helpless either. One of them shifted and joined the fight, her wolf form silver with age but still formidable. Thane led his own soldiers against those who still fought for the false advisor. The throne room echoed with the sounds of combat, steel on steel, the growls of wolves, the cries of the wounded and the dying. Sarah sang, not visions this time, but something else. She had discovered in her training with Elder Miriam that her gift could do more than reveal truth. It could also illuminate paths, show the way forward, guide those who listened toward the choices they needed to make. She sang doubt into the hearts of Voss's men. She sang clarity into the minds of those who wavered. She sang courage into the soldiers who had served Voss out of fear rather than loyalty. One by one, the fighting stopped. Voss's forces threw down their weapons, surrendered, or fled. Within minutes, only a handful of fanatics remained, and they were quickly overwhelmed by the combined forces of Thane and Ronan. Only Voss himself still stood, backed against the wall near the throne, a dagger in his hand. His robes were torn, his face pale, but his eyes still burned with defiance. "It is over," Kael said, approaching him with sword drawn. "You have lost. The heirloom vault will remain sealed. The artifacts of my bloodline will never fall into your corrupted hands." Voss smiled. It was the smile of a man who still held cards he had not yet played. "Have I lost?" he asked. "Tell me, boy, have you noticed anything strange about your soldiers today? Any unusual thirst? Any headaches or fatigue?" Kael's eyes narrowed. "What have you done?" "Insurance." Voss's smile widened. "When Thane's hunting party returned from the mountain with doubt instead of your corpse, I took precautions. The water supply of this castle has been poisoned. A slow-acting toxin, similar to what I used on your father. Everyone who has drunk from the wells in the past few days, your soldiers, Thane's men, the servants, the elders, the common folk who depend on the castle's wells, they will all begin dying within hours." The throne room went silent. "Only I know where the antidote is hidden," Voss continued, his voice gaining strength as he saw the horror spreading across the faces around him. "Kill me, and 10,000 people die. Capture me, and the same. Your only option is to let me go. Give me safe passage from the castle, and I will tell you where to find the cure." Kael stood frozen, his sword still raised, but his face a mask of anguish. Through the bond, Sarah felt the war raging inside him. Justice demanded Voss's death. But could he condemn thousands to die for the sake of vengeance? She stepped forward. "You are lying," she said. Voss's eyes flickered to her. "Am I? Would you like to test that theory? Would you like to gamble the lives of everyone in this castle on the hope that I am bluffing?" Sarah closed her eyes and reached for her gift. This was different from anything she had done before. Not revealing the past, not projecting visions, but seeing the present, finding the hidden paths, the things that Voss had concealed. She pushed deeper than she had ever pushed, ignoring the coldness that began to spread through her core. Elder Miriam had warned her about this. Use too much, too fast, and she would burn herself out. But she had no choice. She saw. The water supply, yes, contaminated. The toxin spreading through the castle's wells, carried by servants and soldiers to every corner of the fortress. Voss had not been bluffing. The poison was real, and it was already at work in the bodies of everyone who had drunk the water. But she also saw the antidote. Vials hidden in a locked chest, the chest concealed behind a false wall in the eastern wine cellars, the same cellars they had used to enter the castle. And she saw the truth of Voss's plan. He had no intention of revealing the location of the antidote. Even if they let him go, he would leave them to die while he escaped to raise another army, to begin his schemes anew in some distant territory. She opened her eyes. "The eastern wine cellars," she said. "Behind the wall where the oldest vintages are stored, there is a false panel, and behind it, a chest with the antidote." Voss's face went pale. "Ronan," Kael said, never taking his eyes from Voss. "Go, now." The captain sprinted from the room, taking a dozen men with him. "How?" Voss snarled. "The Pathfinder gift shows only truth, not hidden things." "Truth is everywhere," Sarah replied. "It just takes the right eyes to see it. Every hidden thing leaves traces in the world. Every secret casts shadows that can be read by those who know how to look." Voss lunged, not toward Kael, but toward Sarah. The dagger in his hand caught the torchlight as he closed the distance between them, his face twisted with 50 years of denied ambition and thwarted schemes. If he could not win, he would at least destroy the woman who had brought him down. Kael moved faster. He intercepted Voss before the blade could reach her, his own sword sweeping up in a blow that should have killed. But at the last moment, he turned the blade, using the flat rather than the edge. Voss went down hard, the dagger flying from his hand. Kael stood over him, sword pointed at his throat. His amber eyes blazed with the desire to finish it, to end this man who had destroyed everything he loved. "Do it!" Voss spat. "Prove that you are no better than me. Prove that the Ironwood line is nothing but violence and vengeance." For a long moment, Kael did not move. Sarah watched, feeling the struggle through the bond. The beast inside him wanted blood, wanted to tear out Voss's throat and taste the justice that had been denied for so long. But the man held the beast in check. "5 years ago," Kael said quietly, "I killed in anger. I let my rage control me, and I became exactly what you wanted me to be. A monster, a cautionary tale." He lowered his sword. "Not this time." He stepped back, gesturing to Thane's soldiers. "Take him. He will face trial before the council and the people he has wronged. He will answer for every death, every lie, every betrayal. And then justice will be served. Not vengeance, justice." Voss's face contorted with disbelief as the soldiers seized him, forcing his arms behind his back. "You are weak," he snarled. "Your father was weak, and you are worse. You had the chance to end this, and you threw it away for principles that will not keep you warm when the next enemy comes." Kael watched him being dragged from the throne room. "Perhaps," he said, "but at least I will face tomorrow as a man, not as the monster you tried to make me." Ronan returned an hour later with the antidote. The healers worked through the night, distributing the cure to everyone who had been exposed to the toxin. By morning, the crisis had passed. 10,000 lives saved because a Pathfinder had seen through the darkness. The trial of Lord Aldrich Voss took place 1 week later. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah's visions, corroborated by documents that Ronan had gathered over 5 years of careful investigation. Testimony from servants and soldiers who had witnessed fragments of the conspiracy. The confession of Voss himself, extracted not through torture, but through the simple weight of undeniable truth. The sentence was death. Kael delivered it personally. It was not an execution born of rage, but a judgment rendered by a king who had learned the difference between vengeance and justice. Voss died without dignity, cursing until the blade silenced him forever. In the months that followed, Kael rebuilt what Voss had corrupted. The council was reconstituted with new members chosen for wisdom rather than susceptibility to manipulation. Laws that had been twisted to serve Voss's interests were reformed. The exiled and rejected, Omegas who had been cast out like Sarah, were invited to return. The heirloom vault was opened at last, its artifacts restored to their rightful place in Ironwood tradition. And at the heart of it all, the Pathfinder gift was restored to its rightful place. Sarah sat at Kael's right hand in council meetings, her gift a safeguard against the lies that had brought them so close to ruin. 3 months after the battle, they formalized their bond before the people. It was not a grand ceremony. It was something simpler, held in the Temple of the First Moon, with Elder Miriam presiding. They spoke vows of partnership and protection, of truth and trust, of two souls who had found each other in the depths of despair and chosen to face the future together. When it was over, Kael took her hand and led her to the balcony of the castle. "You did this," he said quietly. "All of it. Without you, I would still be hiding in that cave waiting to die." "We did this together," she replied. "That was always the point." He kissed her then, and the cheers from below grew even louder. 6 months after the coronation, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The healers confirmed it with a mixture of joy and concern. "The child will be special," they told her. The bloodlines of Alpha and Pathfinder combined for the first time in recorded history. There is no telling what gifts such a child might possess. Sarah shared the news with Kael that evening. She watched his face as the meaning of her words sank in, saw the hope and the fear warring in his eyes. "A child," he said softly. "Our child." "Yes." He gathered her into his arms. "I never thought I would have this," he murmured. "A family, a future. After everything that was taken from me, I never dared to hope. And now? Now I am terrified." He pulled back to look at her, terrified that the enemies we have not yet faced will come for them. "They will come," she said. "I have seen it in visions. There are those who will fear what our child might become, those who will want to control that power or destroy it before it can threaten them. Then we will protect them. Yes, but more than that, we will teach them." She placed her hand over her belly. "We will teach them to use their gifts wisely, to choose justice over vengeance, to see the truth even when lies would be easier." Elder Miriam came to the castle a month later. "The child grows quickly," she said. "I can sense her even from here." "Her?" "A daughter." Miriam smiled. "The first of a new bloodline, neither fully Alpha nor fully Pathfinder, but something that carries both natures in perfect balance." She placed her wrinkled hand on Sarah's belly. "She will be powerful," Miriam said quietly. "More powerful than any who have come before. There will be those who fear her, who try to destroy her before she can come into her full abilities. You must be prepared for that." "We will be," Kael said. The birth came on the night of the winter solstice, under a full moon that turned the snow to silver. It was not an easy labor. The child was strong, stubborn, determined to enter the world on her own terms. Sarah fought through hours of pain, her hand gripping Kael's. And then, as midnight approached, the crying began. It was not the ordinary cry of a newborn. It was a sound like bells, like starlight given voice. Silver light filled the birthing chamber, emanating from the small form that had just entered the world. Sarah looked down at her daughter. The child had eyes like molten silver. Her skin held a golden undertone, a gift from her father's bloodline. And when her tiny hand wrapped around Sarah's finger, visions flooded through the contact. Not of the past, not of possible futures. Of truth, pure and absolute. "Aurora," Sarah whispered. "Her name is Aurora." Kael leaned over them both, his face soft with wonder. "Aurora," he repeated. "The dawn." Sarah stood on the balcony of the castle. Aurora cradled in her arms, watching the sun set over the mountains. Kael stood beside her, his presence a warmth against the winter cold. "They will come for her eventually," she said. "The ones who fear what she might become. Let them come." His voice was steel. "We will be ready." Below them, the castle was alive with light and movement. A kingdom rebuilt from the ashes of corruption, looking toward a future that held both promise and peril. "What do you see?" Kael asked. "When you look at her future?" Sarah gazed down at her daughter, at those silver eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of worlds yet to be born. "I see struggle," she admitted. "I see enemies gathering. I see battles that will test her in ways we cannot imagine." She looked up at him, and there was no fear in her eyes. "But I also see her standing tall when the storm has passed. I see her using her gifts to heal what has been broken. I see a future where truth cannot be suppressed, where lies cannot take root." She smiled. "I see hope." The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The first stars appeared, cold and bright, watching over a world that was slowly learning to choose light over darkness. In her arms, Aurora stirred, those silver eyes opening to gaze at the emerging night. And somewhere in the depths of her newborn mind, Sarah felt the first stirrings of a power that would one day change everything. The journey was far from over. The enemies they had faced were only the beginning. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. There was family. There was the promise of a dawn that no darkness could prevent. They had been rejected, broken, cast out into the snow to die. They had found each other instead, and together they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy of truth and courage, a kingdom reborn from ashes, a hope that would never fade. The end.